Hi, how are you? My name is Bill and I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. I'm not one to easily believe in the supernatural, but something happened to me that made me question a few things. It all started about 6 months ago. I had just moved into an old house that I got for a great price. The place had a certain charm, with creaky hardwood floors and a fireplace that I planned to use in the winter. But from the beginning, there was something a little off. Sometimes I would feel a presence, like someone was watching me. I thought it was just my imagination, maybe because I was living alone for the first time. Then one night, I was watching TV in the living room. It was a quiet night, nothing special. Suddenly, I heard someone calling my name, Bill. It seemed to be coming from the hallway. The sound was clear and sounded familiar, but I couldn't place where I recognized the voice from. I went into the hallway, but there was no one there. I thought maybe it was the noise in the house, or maybe I was so absorbed in the show that I heard things. Over the next few days, the same thing kept happening. Sometimes I was in the bedroom, other times in the kitchen, and it was always the same voice calling out to Bill. Whenever I tried to find the source, no one was there. I started to think I was going crazy. I even mentioned it to a few friends, but they all laughed it off, saying I was probably just stressed about the move. One night, I was sleeping when I was woken up by a whisper right next to my ear. "Bill, come here." I woke up with my heart racing. The room was dark and quiet. I felt a chill down my spine and knew something was definitely wrong. I got up, turned on all the lights, and stayed awake for the rest of the night. After that, things got more intense. I heard the voice more frequently, and now it seemed to be coming from everywhere in the house, as if it were surrounding me. I started losing sleep, becoming paranoid, afraid to go home. That's when I decided to do some research into the history of the house. I discovered that the house had belonged to an elderly woman who lived alone and had passed away there a few years earlier. I couldn't find many details about her, except that her name was Mildred and that she had died peacefully in her sleep. But there was something about her story that intrigued me. It was said that she was very lonely and that in her later years she would often talk to herself, as if she were talking to someone. After learning this, I decided that I needed help. I invited a friend who was psychic to take a look at the house. He said that he had felt a presence, something that meant no harm but was clearly trapped there, perhaps looking for company. He suggested that I try to talk to her, to let her know that I wasn't alone, that it was time to move on. That night, I sat in the living room and, with a little hesitation, began to talk. I told her that I knew about her, that I was sorry for her loneliness, but that it was time for her to rest. I asked her if she needed help to seek the light. It was a strange experience, talking to emptiness, but since then, the voice has stopped. The house has been quiet again. Now, whenever I tell this story, some friends still laugh and say I was just stressed or tired. But I know what I heard. And sometimes I still feel a slight movement in the air, as if someone is passing by, but the voice is gone. Whatever it was, I hope Mildred found the peace she was looking for. Second story. Hello, my name is Alan, and I live in a small coastal town in the U.S. I have always been skeptical of ghost stories and the supernatural. But something happened to me recently that left me intrigued and, honestly, a little scared. It all started one summer night. I was walking home after a long day at work. My apartment is in an old building, built in the 1920s. The place has a certain vintage charm, but it also has its fair share of quirks. Like any old building, the pipes make noise, the floors creak, and there is an old elevator that seems to have a mind of its own. That night, as soon as I walked into the apartment, I felt a strange chill. I thought it was just fatigue. I was almost falling asleep on the couch when I heard someone call me, "Alan." The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but clearly female. I looked around, but of course no one was there. I checked the windows and the door, everything was locked. I felt a little uneasy, but I thought maybe I had imagined things. Maybe it was the sound coming from the hallway of the building, who knows? For the next few days, I kept hearing the voice. Always the same whisper, "Alan," as if someone was trying to get my attention. Sometimes I heard the voice when I was in the bathroom, other times in the kitchen or in the bedroom. The sound was always distant, but recognizable. I started to feel uneasy, and even thought about moving apartments, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. Then, one night, something happened that really scared me. I was sleeping soundly when I was woken up by a feeling of extreme cold. When I opened my eyes, I saw a hazy figure standing next to my bed. I couldn't see clearly, but it seemed to be a woman, with long dark hair. And then, I heard the voice again, clearer and closer, "Alan, please help me." Frozen with fear, I could barely breathe. I blinked and the figure disappeared. I turned on the light, my heart beating 1,000 times a minute. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I decided to investigate the building. I asked the neighbors if they knew of any strange stories or if they had felt anything unusual. An older neighbor who had lived in the building for decades told me a disturbing story. He said that many years ago, a young woman named Emily lived in my apartment. She was lonely and apparently spent a lot of time alone. One day, she was found dead in the apartment, the victim of a suicide. Since then, some residents have reported feeling her presence, especially those who lived in the apartment where she lived. With this information, I became even more intrigued. I decided that I had to do something. That night, I sat in the living room and began to talk, as if I were having a conversation with Emily. I told her that I was sorry for her pain, that she was no longer alone, and that it was time for her to rest. I asked her to go in peace and find the light. After that night, the voices stopped. The apartment was silent, but I still felt a different lightness in the air, as if a weight had been lifted. I don't know if it was my imagination or something else, but I hope Emily found the peace she was looking for. Now, whenever I tell this story, I'm amazed at how real it all seemed. I'm still a bit skeptical about the supernatural, but this experience made me wonder what else might be out there, beyond what we can see and explain. Third story. Hi, my name is Mika and I live in a small town in the middle of the US. My experience with the supernatural is something I never thought I would experience, but here I am, sharing this story with you. It all started a few months ago, when I moved into an old house that I rented. I have always been fascinated by old houses and their stories, so when I found this place, I was enchanted. It was a 2-story house, with a charming porch and large windows. But, within the first few days, I noticed that there was something strange. At night, when the silence took over, I would start to hear strange noises. Sounds of light footsteps, creaking doors, and sometimes a distant murmur. At first, I thought it was just the house settling in. After all, old buildings tend to make noises. But then, something more specific happened. I was in the living room, reading a book, when I clearly heard someone calling my name, "Mika." The voice was soft, feminine, and seemed to be coming from upstairs. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I had heard. I went upstairs, thinking it might be a problem with the wiring or maybe the wind coming through a crack. But I didn't find anything out of the ordinary. For the next few days, the voice continued. Always the same call, "Mika," and always coming from upstairs, as if someone was waiting for me. It started to make me nervous. The voice was so clear that I began to doubt my sanity. Was I imagining things? I talked to a few friends about it, and they suggested that maybe I was just stressed about the move. But then, one night, things got even scarier. I was trying to sleep when I heard the voice again, but this time it was very close, as if someone was whispering in my ear. "Mika, come here." I jumped up, turned on all the lights, and lay awake for the rest of the night, unable to go back to sleep. I decided I needed to find out more about the house. I went to the town records office and discovered that the house had belonged to a woman named Sarah, who had lived there for most of her life. She was a solitary figure, known for keeping to herself and avoiding contact with her neighbors. Sarah had passed away many years ago, but her presence seemed to still linger in the house. I decided that I had to do something. That night, I sat in the living room and, in a firm voice, began to speak. I told Sarah that I knew her story, that she was no longer alone, and that it was time for her to rest. I asked her to go in peace and leave the world of the living. After that, things changed. The house became quieter, and the feeling of being watched disappeared. I don't know what really happened, whether it was really Sarah's spirit or just my mind playing tricks. But I haven't heard the voice since. This experience left me thinking. I have always been skeptical of the supernatural, but this experience made me wonder what else might exist beyond what we know. Whatever it is, I hope Sarah has found the peace she was looking for.